You left after 1 year.
I didn't leave. They forgot where I went.
For more than half a century, she kept it to herself. The cameras had long stopped rolling, and most assumed the story ended there. But at 89, Julie Newmar, forever remembered as the original Catwoman, broke her silence. She finally spoke about Adam West, the man behind the cape and cowl, and what she revealed left even longtime fans speechless. Why now? And what had she been hiding all these years? The truth, it turns out, goes far deeper than anyone expected. In the golden glow of 1960s television, few shows burned brighter than Batman. It was campy, colorful, and completely unforgettable. Airing from 1966 to 1968, it brought a comic book world to life, turning it into appointment television for millions. But for all its flash and flair, it was the chemistry between its stars that truly made it iconic. Adam West, with his straight-faced charm and dry delivery, became the definitive Batman for a generation. Opposite him, Julie Newmar slinked onto the screen as Catwoman, captivating audiences with her wit, elegance, and undeniable presence. Their on-screen tension was electric, flirty, dangerous, and always just on the edge of something more. Fans watched each episode not just for the crime fighting, but for the charged exchanges between hero and villain. Julie's Catwoman was no ordinary antagonist. She was complex, alluring, and oddly sympathetic. And Adam's Batman? He never quite knew what to do with her, torn between justice and something far more human. Behind the scenes, their dynamic intrigued crew members and co-stars alike. Were they just acting? Or was there something real under the surface? As the series gained cult status over the years, that question never fully went away. Comic book historians, pop culture writers, and fans at conventions would often speculate, was there ever something between Julie and Adam? But while Adam West remained in the public eye, open, funny, and reflective, Julie kept a certain distance. She embraced her fame, yes. She appeared at panels, spoke about the character of Catwoman, and even poked fun at her iconic status. But whenever the topic turned to Adam West, her answers were polite and brief. The truth behind their connection, what they shared or did not share, seemed locked away in the vault of television history. Until now, filming Batman was anything but ordinary. The show's over-the-top style demanded high energy, tight schedules, and a flair for the theatrical. But it was also a playground for actors who were in on the joke, and Adam West and Julie Newmar played their parts to perfection. On set, Adam was known for his dry humor and calm demeanor. He rarely broke character, even between takes, and brought a subtle intelligence to a role that could have easily become silly. Julie, meanwhile, added an unpredictable spark. She was bold, imaginative, and carried herself like someone who always knew more than she let on. Together, their scenes sizzled. Directors and crew members noticed it right away. The way Adam would hold his gaze a second too long. The way Julie would curl a single word, making it sound like an invitation. The scripts gave them the lines, but the chemistry? That was theirs. Off-camera, though, things were more complicated. The show's whirlwind schedule left little room for personal time. Cast members often described the atmosphere as professional but playful. Julie and Adam got along well, but they never appeared overly close outside of work. No romantic whispers, no lingering goodbyes at the end of the day. Just two stars playing their parts, and then going their separate ways. At least, that is what everyone thought. Julie later described those days as a kind of dream. She remembered the costumes, the bright sets, and the laughter between takes. But when asked directly about Adam, she often offered a cryptic smile or changed the subject. He was very good at what he did, she once said, and he knew how to keep a secret. There were moments that stood out, even then. Once, during a particularly long shoot, Adam reportedly brought Julie a single rose between scenes. Nothing extravagant, just thoughtful. Another time, she paused filming to help him adjust a piece of his utility belt that had gone askew, drawing quiet laughs from the crew. These small moments hinted at something warmer beneath the surface, a quiet understanding, maybe even admiration. But the two never spoke openly about it. Not in interviews, not in memoirs, not even decades later, when the world had long moved on from Gotham's colorful streets. Fans, of course, noticed. They always do. Conspiracy theories popped up on forums. Old clips were rewatched, slowed down, analyzed. Some were convinced Julie and Adam had shared something personal, something that had to be hidden back then. Others chalked it up to good acting and nostalgia. But all agreed on one thing: whatever was, or was not, between them, it never fully disappeared. Even as reruns aired for new generations, the question remained: what really happened between Batman and Catwoman? And why had Julie stayed silent for so long? When Batman ended in 1968, the cast scattered like smoke from a rooftop chase. Adam West found himself typecast, forever tied to the cape and cowl. He struggled to find serious roles, but eventually embraced the legacy, becoming a beloved icon at fan events and in voice work. He leaned into the nostalgia, turning a once-limiting label into a crown. Julie Newmar took a different path. She distanced herself from the role that made her famous, diving into theater, writing, and later, even inventing. She became something of an enigma, still admired, still glamorous, but increasingly private. And when she did re-emerge, it was always on her terms. Over the years, Adam and Julie were occasionally seen at the same events, especially as the Batman fandom swelled with new interest. But something was always missing. Unlike other celebrity reunions, where old co-stars embraced and reminisced freely, there was a quiet restraint between them, a formality, a line neither seemed eager to cross. Julie gave interviews about her time as Catwoman, often focusing on costumes, choreography, or how much fun she had with the role. But the topic of Adam West rarely came up, and when it did, her answers were consistently brief. Respectful? Yes, but distant. She praised his professionalism. She called him a gentleman more than once. But those were the kind of compliments that felt careful, almost rehearsed. Fans noticed. So did interviewers. In contrast, Adam was more open. He often spoke about the joy of working on Batman, and he never had a bad word for his co-stars. In a few late interviews, he called Julie magnificent and utterly unique. Yet he never hinted at anything deeper either. It was as if the subject had an invisible boundary around it. This silence stretched on for decades. Through television retrospectives, through comic convention Q&As, even through Adam's death in 2017, Julie remained mostly silent. She offered a kind tribute, of course, a short, lovely message expressing her admiration and gratitude. But once again, it left more unsaid than said. Why did she hold back? Some believed she was simply private. Others speculated that their relationship, whatever it had been, was too complicated or too personal to reduce to sound bites. Still, the absence of clarity only fueled curiosity. In a world where celebrities often shared too much, Julie shared almost nothing, until, quietly, that began to change. Not all at once, but there were signs, subtle ones, that something was shifting. She began to speak more openly in interviews, especially as she approached her late 80s. Her tone softened. Her stories became more reflective, and slowly, piece by piece, the wall she had built began to come down. Something had changed, and for the first time in over 50 years, Julie Newmar seemed ready to tell the truth. Long before any formal admission, there were signs, small moments scattered across decades, like clues in an old detective story. Most people missed them. A few paid attention, but only now, in hindsight, do they form a clearer picture. Julie Newmar always had a way with words. Even when she said very little, it carried weight. In the 1980s and 1990s, she occasionally appeared at fan conventions. When asked about Adam West, her answers were often accompanied by a playful smirk or a raised brow. "He was very Batman," she once said, leaving the crowd to interpret her meaning. In another interview from the early 2000s, she recalled how professional Adam had been on set. Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, "Too professional sometimes." That was the trouble. She chuckled afterward, but offered no explanation. The interviewer moved on. Fans did not. Over the years, Julie became more comfortable talking about the cultural impact of Catwoman. She spoke of empowerment, elegance, and the balance of danger and charm. Yet Adam's name continued to be a rare presence in her stories, like a missing character in a familiar tale. There were written pieces too. Julie, an eloquent writer, often posted essays and reflections online. In one tribute to old Hollywood romances, she mentioned a man who never said what he felt, but whose silence said everything. She never named him, but fans speculated. Even in the 2010s, during a resurgence of interest in the Batman series, Julie kept her tone measured. She appeared in documentaries and retrospectives, sitting beside other cast members, sharing memories with grace. But when asked directly about Adam, she deflected with praise for the show, or shifted to safer memories: costumes, stunts, lighting, and lipstick. A few times, though, her voice would catch. Her expression would change for just a moment, like she had wandered into a memory and was unsure whether to stay or step back. Then came a particular panel in 2016, just a year before Adam's passing. A fan asked Julie if she ever had feelings for her co-star. The crowd held its breath. Julie paused, smiled, then said softly, "There was something beautiful there." But beauty, sometimes, is meant to be brief. It was not a confession, not exactly, but it was the closest she had ever come to lifting the curtain. After Adam West's death in 2017, Julie posted a message online. It was short and poetic. "You wore the cape with honor, and behind the mask, a heart too full to speak." No interviews followed, no elaboration, just that. Still, the hints were piling up. The way she spoke, the things she left unsaid, the sadness that seemed to follow when his name came up. She had carried something for a long time, something unsaid but not forgotten, and eventually it became too heavy to keep to herself. By the time she reached 89, Julie Newmar had outlived nearly all the bright lights of her era. Her elegance remained untouched. Her voice still carried that unmistakable calm, but something in her had shifted. In recent interviews and public appearances, there was a new kind of openness, not just about her career, but about her life. She had begun talking more about aging, memory, and legacy. Her reflections turned inward. Fans noticed a quiet urgency in the way she told stories, as if she knew her time to tell them was running short. It was during a live-streamed Q&A, part of a digital fan celebration, that the turning point came. The session was casual, light-hearted questions about costumes, stunts, and favorite episodes. Then someone asked, as they always did, about Adam West. But this time, the tone of the question was different. It was gentle, almost reverent. "Is there something you always wanted to say to Adam but never got the chance?" Julie paused. The host moved to the next question, but she lifted her hand slowly and spoke. "Yes," she said, "there is." She looked off camera for a moment, gathering herself. "You reach a point in life," she continued, "where silence becomes heavier than the truth, and I've carried this one long enough." That was when the room changed. The audience, the host, everyone knew they were about to hear something they had never heard before. Julie said she had loved working with Adam. She admired him deeply, both on screen and off, but it was more than that. "There was a time," she said, "when I wished he had looked at me not as Catwoman, but just as Julie, and I think maybe he did. But neither of us said it." The admission was tender, not dramatic, not scandalous, but honest. She went on to describe how the timing had never been right, how they had both been cautious, how careers and reputations, especially in that era, came before feelings. "We were icons before we were people," she said. That was the price. When asked why she was choosing to speak now, she simply said, "Because love, even unspoken, deserves a voice." There were no gasps, no headlines screaming controversy, just a quiet moment that hung in the digital air like a curtain finally being drawn. Julie smiled after her words, not a smile of relief, but one of peace. For decades, fans had speculated, writers had guessed, clips had been dissected, but the truth was far simpler and far more human than anyone had imagined. At 89, she had nothing left to protect. And so, at last, she told the truth. What Julie Newmar revealed was not scandalous. It was not the kind of revelation that made tabloid headlines or viral tweets, but it was, in its own quiet way, earth-shattering for those who had watched, wondered, and waited. She did not claim a secret romance. There were no hidden letters or clandestine meetings. What she shared was more subtle and perhaps more powerful. A portrait of love that was felt but never pursued. A connection that lingered in glances, pauses, and unspoken understanding. In a follow-up interview, she said, "We were both very good at playing roles, on screen and in life, but I always wondered what might have happened if we had stopped performing." Julie admitted she had feelings for Adam, not a crush, not a passing attraction, but something deeper, something that lived quietly beneath the surface, never acted upon, but always present. "He had a sadness in his eyes sometimes," she said, "like he was searching for something, but never quite saying what it was." She revealed that during their time on Batman, they shared long conversations between takes, not about scripts or stunts, but about life, dreams, and fears. He once told me, she recalled, that the hardest part of playing Batman was pretending to be brave when he felt anything but. Julie had never forgotten that. They were close, she said, but always kept a certain distance, partly because of the times. They were working under strict studio scrutiny, partly because of circumstance, but also, she admitted, because of fear. I was afraid that if we acknowledged it, whatever it was, it would disappear, she said. So we let it live in the space between scenes. Julie's truth was not about missed opportunities or regret, it was about recognition, that something had existed between them, even if it was never named, and that it mattered. She did not speak of this with bitterness. In fact, she seemed grateful. Some things are beautiful because they never become real, she said. They live in memory, unspoiled. The revelation moved fans, not because it confirmed rumors, but because it gave voice to something rarely talked about, the silent, delicate relationships that can define a life without ever becoming one. Many viewers reached out after her statement, sharing their own stories of unspoken love, of connections that came and went without explanation. Julie, always the thoughtful artist, responded by writing a short essay online titled "What We Never Said." In it, she described her feelings not as regret, but as reverence. Adam West, for his part, never spoke of such feelings publicly. But looking back now, at the interviews, the tone in his voice when he mentioned her, it is hard not to see the echoes, the softness, the quiet knowing. The truth Julie finally shared did not rewrite history. It illuminated it. It cast a gentle light on two figures we thought we knew, revealing the tenderness that had always been there, just out of frame. When the final curtain falls, what remains is not just the roles actors played, but the way they made us feel. For Adam West and Julie Newmar, their legacy was never confined to Gotham City. It stretched far beyond the capes and claws, reaching into the hearts of those who watched them dance across the screen in a strange, beautiful game of cat and bat. Their chemistry helped redefine what television could do. In a time of rigid stereotypes and clean-cut heroes, they brought complexity. Julie's Catwoman was not a villain to be defeated. She was a force to be reckoned with, admired, and sometimes even understood. Adam's Batman was not just a do-gooder in tights. He was thoughtful, conflicted, and, as Julie later revealed, quietly human. Together, they became more than characters. They became symbols. And yet, it is the humanity behind the masks that now lingers. Julie's late-life confession did not tarnish their legacy. It enriched it. It gave fans a final puzzle piece, a way to understand what had always been just out of reach. In the years since Adam's passing, tributes have continued to pour in. Statues, animated cameos, books, and podcasts all celebrate his contribution to pop culture. He is remembered as the Batman, who never needed darkness to be taken seriously, the hero who could smile. Julie, too, has embraced her legacy more fully. In interviews and essays, she now speaks with a mix of wit and wisdom, unafraid to reflect on what was and what might have been. Her revelation about Adam West has sparked new appreciation for their bond. Fans rewatch old episodes with fresh eyes, catching glances they once missed, lines that now carry double meaning. But perhaps the most lasting impact is not the mystery they kept, but the grace with which they kept it. In a world driven by oversharing and fast headlines, theirs was a story told in silence, in restraint, in dignity. They chose privacy when the world craved gossip. They held on to something sacred, not because it was forbidden, but because it was fragile. And when Julie finally chose to speak, she did so not to stir controversy or claim attention, but to honor a connection that shaped her life. She gave fans something rare, closure, wrapped in tenderness, and in doing so, reminded the world that stories do not end when the screen fades to black. They evolve, they breathe, and sometimes they quietly wait for the right moment to be told. What remains now is a kind of poetry, a reminder that some of the deepest relationships are not those that end in romance, but those that linger quietly in memory, unchanged, unspoiled, and unforgettable. Batman and Catwoman may have played a game of cat and mouse on screen, but behind the masks, there were two people, imperfect, brave, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit in love. And that truth, shared at last, is perhaps the most beautiful legacy of all. Because in the end, what we remember most are not the gadgets, not the stunts, not even the lines, but the glances, the silences, and the truths we carry with us long after the